How can organisms we think of as, well, simple, even brainless, pull off things that really challenge our own engineers, even supercomputers? It just seems wrong, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, take slime molds. You get dozens of these tiny little amoebas, they merge together, and suddenly you have this single smart slime mold.
Yeah, and it can design networks like that Tokyo Railway example.
Exactly. Stuff that took human engineers years to figure out. This isn't just some, weird biology fact.
Yeah.
It's a huge demonstration of something called swarm intelligence.
And what's really mind-bending about it is that these complex, intelligent-seeming behaviors, they don't always need a central control system, a brain, basically.
Or a boss telling everyone what to do.
Exactly. It just emerges from lots of individual, simple agents doing their own thing, following really basic rules. There's no leader, no grand plan.
It really makes you rethink what intelligence even is.
Completely. Shifts the whole perspective.
So that's our mission for this deep dive today. We want to unpack how these decentralized systems in nature actually manage this complex problem solving.
Look at the advantages, but also the downsides, the limitations.
Yeah, there are definitely limitations. And ultimately, we'll show you how these natural algorithms are like blueprints for our own human innovations.
And how evolution itself, on a massive planetary scale, might just be the ultimate swarm intelligence shaping everything.
Viewing intelligence not as this single thing inside one head, but something distributed, something that emerges. Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So first things first, to really get a handle on this, we need to define swarm intelligence. What are the core characteristics? What makes it tick?
Okay, so fundamentally, it's about three key things. Decentralized control, like we said, no single boss.
Right.
Then self-organization. The pattern, the structure, it arises from the bottom up.
Okay.
And third, emergent behavior. The complex stuff you see at the group level isn't programmed into any single individual. It just happens from their interactions.
So no master plan, just simple local interactions leading to complex global results.
Precisely. Each little guy is just reacting to its immediate neighbors or environment, following its simple programming.
And for this collective magic to actually happen, what conditions need to be met? What's essential?
Well, two things are really crucial. First, you need a lot of participants. A vast number.
Safety in numbers. Or just more interactions.
More interactions, more chances for patterns to emerge, more robustness. Think millions of ants, trillions of bacteria. Scale matters.
Okay, big numbers. What else?
Second, they need a way to talk to each other, some means of information exchange. Pheromones are the classic example in insects. It's like this silent chemical language. Very efficient, very effective, even if wordless.
Right, okay, so lots of agents and a way for them to pass information around.
That's the foundation.
Now, one of the things that jumped out from the sources, and it's just fascinating, is this paradox. You have systems running on simple rules made up of individuals that are, frankly, kind of dumb on their own.
Hopelessly stupid was one description for individual ants.
Right. But collectively, they solve problems that would take a supercomputer, well, basically forever. How does that work? How does simple plus simple equal complex genius?
It is the central paradox, isn't it? But the core idea, really, is that complexity doesn't need complex parts.
Okay.
It emerges when you apply those simple rules over and over again with lots and lots of agents interacting. The individual might be simple, but the interactions between them, the feedback loops they create, that's where the magic happens.
So it's not the ants, it's the anting, the collective dynamic.
You could put it that way, yeah. It's the system, the process that generates the sophistication.
Okay. With those principles laid out, let's actually look at some examples. Let's take a tour through nature's Swarm Intelligence Showcase.
Sounds good. It really is a masterclass out there. And maybe we start with one of the most surprising ones, the slime mold.
Yes. Futurism polycephalum. Not a plant, not an animal, not a fungus. Just this weird, brainless, amoeba-like thing.
But incredibly smart in its own way.
Like that Tokyo Railway experiment. Scientists basically laid out a map of Tokyo using oat flakes food for the slime mold at the station locations.
And used bright light, which it hates, to represent obstacles like mountains or lakes.
And what happened?
It was amazing. The slime mold grew out, explored, sending out these cytoplasmic tubes. And then it retracted the inefficient ones, leaving behind only the shortest, most efficient routes connecting the food.
And these routes?
They almost perfectly matched the actual human-engineered Tokyo rail system. It did in a day what took engineers years.
How What was it optimizing for?
Its own survival, basically. It wants to connect all the food sources while minimizing the amount of its own body, its protoplasm needed to do it. Minimize its mass.
Which is pretty much exactly what an engineer tries to do, right? Minimize cost, minimize material.
Exactly. It's the same optimization principle. And remember, this organism is actually millions of individual amoebas merged together. They call it many-headed for a reason.
Hmm.
Merging gives it better problem-solving ability, even a kind of memory.
So the big takeaway here is intelligence, even for something like designing a network, doesn't necessarily need a brain. This simple organism offers a model for efficiency, for resilience.
Huge potential for biomimicry there. Urban planning, logistics, communication networks.
Okay, from brainless network designers to something maybe more familiar but just as amazing. Ants.
Ah, yes.
Individually, like we said, the sources describe them as having pretty limited smarts, hopelessly stupid even, but together,
Wow.
collective brilliance. They solve incredibly complex problems daily, like the traveling salesperson problem.
Right, finding the shortest route to visit a bunch of places and get back home. Easy for a few spots, but it gets impossibly hard really fast.
Astronomically hard. For just 16 cities, the number of possible routes is staggering, more than the estimated number of particles in the universe. Yet ants crack similar problems all the time finding food.
And they do it using those pheromones we mentioned. Their chemical language.
Exactly. It's all about the trails. An ant finds food, lays down a pheromone trail on the way back. Others follow it. But how does that find the shortest path?
Ah, well, here's the clever bit. Ants don't just follow blindly. They also tend to explore a little, maybe cut corners. The rule is basically smell a trail, follow it. But shorter paths get reinforced faster because ants cover them more quickly, back and forth.
So more ants travel the shorter path in the same amount of time.
Right. Which means the pheromone smell gets stronger on the shorter path. Longer paths, meanwhile, have more time for the pheromones to evaporate, so they become less attractive.
Positive feedback for the efficient routes. Simple, but genius.
It really is. And they use this collective power for more than just finding food.
Like building stuff.
Building stuff, survival.
Yeah.
They form living rafts out of their own bodies to survive floods, clinging together for weeks if needed,
Wow.
or living bridges to cross gaps or attack larger prey like wasp nests.
Incredible coordination.
And then you have things like the Argentine ants. They've formed this global super colony. They recognize each other by smell across continents, don't fight amongst themselves. They even herd aphids like tiny livestock. They literally reshape ecosystems.
So the lesson here is about redundancy. Positive feedback.
Both. The power of positive feedback loops to find optimal solutions and the redundancy of having millions of agents. Even if some ants make mistakes, the overall system corrects and converges on the best answer. That's hugely relevant for things like distributed computing, network routing, systems where you need reliability without a central controller.
Okay, sticking with social insects, let's move underground. Or maybe above ground. Spectacularly. Termites.
Ah, termites. And quick fact check, they're actually closer to cockroaches than ants.
Right, not just big ants. And they build these, well, skyscrapers, basically.
Exactly. Mounds up to 8 meters tall in deserts, made from sand, wood, their own saliva, and they're not just piles of dirt, they're sophisticated climate control systems.
Cooling towers, like at a power plant. How does that work?
Pretty ingeniously. During the hot day, warm air rises up through a central chimney, pulling cooler, moist air up from chambers deep underground where the colony lives.
Okay.
At night, as the outside cools, the stored heat in the mound pushes warm air down, circulating it and preventing the colony from freezing. The earth underneath acts like a thermal battery, storing heat and coolness.
All without any active machinery, just clever design. And they build this. How? No architect, no blueprints.
None at all. It's all driven by the call of the swarm, as the sources put it. Simple rules again.
Like what?
For repairs, they just gather where damage is, place mud balls mixed with pheromones. They have rules to avoid walling themselves in. For digging tunnels, it's trial and error guided by temperature and smell.
Trial and error.
Yeah, 2 main rules seem to be. Only mark tunnels with pheromones if the temperature and humidity are reinforcing the good tunnels. And second, if a tunnel isn't getting used or doesn't have the right scent cues, it's probably bad. So fill it in, try digging elsewhere.
And this simple process leads to these perfect climate-controlled structures that last for centuries.
Some for millennia. Those flat hills in South Africa. Some are thought to be 34,000-year-old termite mounds.
34,000 years. That's hard to grasp. The resilience is incredible.
It really is. And think about what that means for us. Self-regulating climate systems built without a central plan. That's a powerful model for future architecture, right? Sustainable buildings, maybe even self-healing structures built by autonomous robots on Mars or other extreme places.
From termites to bees, another social insect, but different. They fly, they see.
Right. Operating in 3D space changes the game. They have vision, even see in ultraviolet, which apparently makes flowers look like landing strips to them.
Cool. And they learn, right? I read they even taught bees to play a kind of soccer.
Yeah, they're surprisingly good learners. But their swarm intelligence really shines in communication, specifically how scout bees tell the others where the good nectar is.
The waggle dance.
The famous waggle dance. It's their language. A figure-8 pattern, and the middle part, the waggle run, is key. The angle of that run relative to the sun tells the other bees the direction to fly.
And the duration tells them the distance.
Exactly. The longer the waggle, sometimes described as a twerk, the farther away the food source. About 1 second of waggling corresponds to roughly 1 kilometer of flight. And a more vigorous, longer dance signals a richer source.
That's remarkably precise.
Yeah.
How do they measure the distance they've flown?
There's something called optical flow. They judge distance by how quickly the ground seems to be moving beneath them as they fly. Faster flow means they're closer to the ground or flying faster. Slower flow means higher or slower. They integrate this visual information.
So it's a more complex communication than just pheromone trails. It's symbolic, encoding direction and distance.
Right. It uses advanced sensory data, integrates it, turns it into a symbolic representation. It kind of blurs the line between simple rules and something more like elementary cognition, all within the swarm context.
Okay, let's zoom way down now to the microscopic level. Bacteria.
Yeah, the unseen majority. Did you know bacteria make up something like 2 to 3 kilograms of your body weight?
Seriously, that much.
Yep. They outnumber our own human cells, mostly in the gut, helping with digestion and stuff.
And they have swarm intelligence too. How does that even work?
Through a process called quorum sensing, basically they can sense how many of them are around.
They count themselves.
Not exactly counting one by one, but they release signaling molecules. When the concentration of those molecules gets high enough, meaning there's a dense population, a quorum, then they switch on their collective behaviors.
Like what kind of behaviors?
Well, dental plaque is one example. That's a biofilm. Enough bacteria get together, they reach a quorum, and they collectively start releasing acid to dissolve your tooth enamel.
Charming.
Or myxobacteria. They form cooperative wolf packs, also biofilms, to hunt down other bacteria like E. coli. And if food runs out, they cooperate to build these complex spore-producing structures that look like tiny mushrooms.
Wow. Cooperation even at that scale.
And they can interact with larger organisms in complex ways. Think of the Hawaiian bobtail squid. It cultivates specific glowing bacteria, Vibrio fischeri, in a special organ.
Why?
Camouflage. The glow matches the moonlight from above, so the squid doesn't cast a shadow and get eaten by predators below. And the squid controls the brightness by controlling the bacteria's food supply.
That's incredible symbiosis.
And it gets weirder. There was an experiment with fruit flies. Their gut bacteria actually influenced who they chose to mate with.
Wait, bacteria influencing mating choice.
Yeah. Flies raised on different diets had different gut bacteria, and they preferred to mate with flies that had the same bacteria. Normalize their gut flora, and they'd mate freely again.
So this leads to speculation about humans, right?
Yeah.
Could our gut bacteria influence our mood, our IQ, even our math skills?
It's a very active area of research. The hypothesis is definitely out there. It suggests the subtle chemical influence from our microbiome might be affecting us in ways we barely understand. Challenges our idea of individual free will, maybe? Highlights how interconnected everything is.
Mind-blowing. Okay, so these systems are incredibly powerful, sophisticated, but they're not perfect, right? Swarm intelligence can fail.
Absolutely. It's not infallible. The very simplicity of the rules that make them efficient can also lead to, well, glitches, failures, especially when the environment throws them a curveball or signals get distorted.
Like the ant death spiral.
That's the classic grim example. An ant makes a mistake, maybe gets disoriented, starts walking in a circle, it leaves a pheromone trail, other ants pick up the trail and follow.
Leading them in circles, too.
Exactly. You get this vicious cycle. More ants join, reinforcing the circular trail. They can get trapped, thousands of them, just marching in a spiral until they drop from exhaustion and die.
That naturalist, William Beebe, saw one.
Mm-hmm.
How big was it?
He described one in Guyana that was 370 meters in circumference. Bigger than a large sports stadium, just a swirling mass of dying ants.
Just horrifying. A system glitch with fatal consequences.
A stark reminder of the potential downsides of simple local rules. And bees aren't immune either.
With their fancy optical flow, how can
Yeah.
that go wrong?
Well, remember they judge distance by how fast the ground appears to move beneath them.
Uh-huh.
If they happen to fly over perfectly still water or maybe a mirror, there's no texture, no pattern moving, or they just see their own reflection. Their system tries to make sense of it, tries to get closer to resolve the image,
So they fly lower.
and lower until splash, they hit the surface and drown.
Another system failure caused by an unexpected environmental condition.
Exactly. It highlights this critical trade-off. Decentralized systems based on simple rules can be super efficient and robust in their normal context. But that same simplicity can make them fragile, brittle, when faced with something truly new or weird. They might lack the adaptability of more complex, maybe centrally controlled systems in those edge cases.
That's a really important point for anyone thinking about copying these systems, right? For biomimicry or AI design.
Definitely. You have to think about failure modes. How do you detect and maybe mitigate these kinds of algorithmic glitches?
Yet, despite these potential pitfalls, we are increasingly looking to nature's swarms for inspiration. Architecture, technology, algorithms.
Absolutely. The successes far outweigh the glitches in the grand scheme of nature, and we're learning to harness those successes. Take architecture.
Like the termite rounds.
Exactly. Look at the Eastgate Center in Harare, Zimbabwe, designed by architect Mick Pierce back in the 90s. It's the largest commercial building in the country.
And it's based on termite principles.
Directly. He studied how termite mounds regulate temperature. The building uses heavy concrete blocks for thermal mass. They absorb heat during the day and release it slowly or absorb coolness at night. And it uses low-energy fans, just like the natural air currents in a termite mound, to help circulate the air.
So what's the result? Does it work?
Fantastically well. It uses a tiny fraction of the energy a conventional air-conditioned building of that size would need in that climate. It stays comfortable using passive, nature-inspired design.
That's not just copying the shape then. It's understanding the algorithm the termites use for climate control.
That's the key to true biomimicry, understanding the principles, the process.
And we're seeing this in robotics too.
Oh, yeah. There's a startup called Terms, inspired by termites. They're developing these simple little robots.
What do they do?
Build things. A human places the first block, and the robot's rule is basically place your block near another block. Following just that simple instruction, they can collectively build towers, walls, small skyscrapers.
Simple rules, collective construction. Where could that be used?
The big vision includes places like Mars. Send a swarm of these robots. They could potentially use local Martian soil, maybe 3D print binder, and build habitats autonomously. They can even link up to form bigger robots for heavier tasks.
Wow. And what about flying robots? Drone swarms.
That's another huge area. Instead of painstakingly programming the flight path of every single drone in a display.
Right, you see those amazing light shows.
Yeah, you treat them as a swarm. Each drone follows just a few simple rules, often inspired by flocking birds or schooling fish or even bees.
Like what kind of rules?
Typically 3 basic ones. 1, try not to collide with your neighbors. 2, try to match the average direction of your neighbors. And 3, try to stay close to the center of the group. Don't stray too far.
Separation, alignment, cohesion.
Exactly. And just from those simple rules, you get these incredibly complex, fluid, seemingly coordinated movements of the whole swarm. They improvise, adapt to each other. It's used for light shows, but also for practical things like formation flying, searching areas, obstacle avoidance.
So again, complex behavior from simple agents. And it's robust because there's no single point of failure. If one drone drops out, the swarm adapts.
Precisely. It's a different way of thinking about control in robotics and AI. Lots of simple, cheap agents interacting rather than one super complex, expensive one. Very useful for risky environments or tasks needing redundancy.
And these ideas aren't just for physical things. They apply to software too, right? Algorithms.
Absolutely. The optimization we saw in slime molds, the pathfinding in ants, the self-assembly in termites, these are all powerful computational metaphors.
So we actually have algorithms based on ants.
We do. Ant colony optimization, ACO algorithms. They mimic how ants use pheromones to find short paths. They're used to solve things like the traveling salesperson problem computationally, or for routing traffic in communication networks, or planning delivery routes for vehicles.
And swarm robotics is a whole field.
Yep, studying how you can get large numbers of relatively simple robots to cooperate on tasks that are too complex for any single one.
So the big picture for algorithms is Nature figured out distributed computing long before we did.
Pretty much. Natural swarms solve computationally hard problems by spreading the load across many simple processors, the individual agents. It suggests that decentralized parallel approaches, inspired by biology, can be more efficient, scalable, and robust for complex tasks, especially when the environment is changing.
Okay, let's zoom out again to the biggest scale imaginable. You mentioned earlier evolution itself as swarm
Right.
intelligence.
Think about it, operating across the entire planet over millions, billions of years. It's the ultimate decentralized problem-solving system.
Trying to solve the problem of survival.
Adaptation.
Exactly. And we actually have experiments that show evolution happening in real time, like a swarm algorithm at work. Richard Linsky's long-term E. coli experiment is the famous one.
Tell us about that. He started it way back in 1988. Took 12 flasks of identical E. coli bacteria. Every day, he gives them a limited amount of glucose, their food, and then dilutes the culture by 99%, transferring just 1% to fresh medium. This keeps them growing, but prevents massive overpopulation, forcing them to compete and adapt.
And this has been running since 1988. How many generations is that?
It's now over 36 years, which translates to more than 74,000 bacterial generations. Think about that compared to us, maybe 20 years per human generation.
That's an incredible evolutionary time frame compressed into decades. And what happened?
The big breakthrough came after about 31,000 generations. One of the 12 flasks suddenly became much cloudier than the
I
other.
mean, more bacteria.
Way more bacteria. They figured out why. The bacteria in that one flask had evolved the ability to eat citrate.
Citrate, wasn't that always in their growth medium?
Yes, but E. coli normally can't metabolize citrate when oxygen is present, which it was. It was a defining characteristic of the species. But this population evolved the ability. A major evolutionary innovation happened right there in the lab.
How do they describe the algorithm behind that evolution?
Well, it seems to have two key parts for bacteria. First, reproduce incredibly fast. Make trillions of copies. This maximizes the sheer chance that a beneficial mutation will pop up somewhere.
Okay, sheer numbers.
Second, don't be greedy. When a beneficial mutation appears, don't just pass it to your offspring. Bacteria can share genes directly with each other in the same generation. It's called horizontal gene transfer.
So good mutations can spread really quickly through the existing population.
Super quickly. It dramatically accelerates adaptation. And later, by 2014, something else happened in that citrate-eating flask. Some bacteria that couldn't eat citrate evolved to eat the waste products of the citrate eaters.
So they started cooperating, forming an ecosystem.
Exactly. Instead of just competing, they formed a simple two-species ecosystem based on this new food source. It's direct, observable proof of evolution as this incredibly efficient, decentralized optimization process. Each bacterium is like a tiny probe exploring the vast space of possible survival solutions.
And the successful solutions, the good mutations, spread rapidly through the swarm.
It ties the whole concept of swarm intelligence together, from slime molds right up to the entire biosphere.
And we see this happening now too, right, with new environmental challenges.
Sure.
Plastic.
Yeah, the plastosphere. Plastic floating in the ocean, especially bottles and fragments, becomes a habitat. It gets colonized by microbes.
And some of them are eating it.
Some have evolved the ability to eat plastic. They've developed enzymes that can break down the complex polymer chains. Scientists are finding specific bacteria that seem specialized for different types of common plastic.
That's amazing. Nature adapting to our pollution.
It's a rapid evolutionary response, showing just how powerful this adaptive swarm process is. And maybe, just maybe, we can harness those bacterial solutions, like their plastic-eating enzymes, to help clean up the mess we've made.
Which brings us to maybe the most provocative idea of all. If evolution is a planetary swarm and bacteria colonies are swarms, what about us? Is human society itself a form of swarm intelligence?
It's a really powerful analogy, isn't it? Think about our collective achievements. Exploring the deepest oceans, mapping the human genome, sending rockets into space. No single person could do any of that.
It takes massive coordination. Millions of people, specialized roles.
Exactly. Like biological swarms, human society has decentralized decision-making. No single person controls everything. We have specialized roles, complex communication networks like language, the internet, institutions.
a collective intelligence emerges.
You could definitely argue that. It provides a framework for understanding how we learn collectively, how societies evolve, maybe even where we're headed. It also suggests our collective failures.
Like wars or economic crashes or environmental destruction.
Maybe they're analogous to those ant death spirals or drowning bees. Emergent failures arising from how our individual rules and interactions play out on a massive scale under complex, maybe unforeseen conditions.
That's a sobering thought.
Uh,
Okay, let's try to wrap this up, bring it all together.
so swarm intelligence, it's clearly this fundamental principle. We see it everywhere in nature, enabling complex adaptive systems.
From slime molds optimizing networks to termites building climate-controlled cities, astonishing complexity from simple, decentralized interactions.
But as we saw, it's not magic. It has vulnerabilities. Those ant death spirals, the drowning bees, the simplicity can be a weakness too.
Understanding those glitches is crucial. Still, the power of the principle is undeniable, and it's inspiring a lot of human innovation.
Architecture, robotics, AI algorithms. We're learning from nature's blueprints.
And on the grandest scale, we have evolution. The ultimate swarm intelligence, constantly adapting, constantly finding solutions across the entire planet.
The ultimate distributed problem solver.
Looking ahead, the potential seems huge. Harnessing bacteria to clean up plastic, maybe
Mhm.
building more robust adaptive AI based on swarm principles.
Definitely. But also learning how to avoid or mitigate the failure modes in both natural and artificial swarms. That remains a big challenge.
So the final thought for you, our listeners.
Hmm.
If we accept this idea, even just as a metaphor, that human society functions like a giant swarm, what does that perspective mean for you, for your role within this collected intelligence?
How can we, as individuals, as nodes in this huge human network, learn from nature's simple rules? Can we apply those lessons to tackle our own complex collective problems more effectively? What stands out to you from this whole deep dive?